What's going on, young people? This is our fourth homework about motivation, emotion, and personality. Our last class was an introduction to emotion and those theories of emotion. Today, we're going to be talking about stress, what stresses us out, how the body responds, okay? And then how we deal with it accordingly. So when we first talk about stress, the main name to know, the name I want you to write and circle and start, is a guy named Hans Selye. Selye. I will call him Selye Stressier because his research was about the study of stress. And he studied what the body does when stressed. He called it general adaptation syndrome, meaning it's true for everyone, and it's how we adapt when there is a stress, okay? So here's what happens. He says, when something goes wrong, maybe you are in a conflict with your significant other, right? Maybe you're struggling in a class, you have exams coming up, okay? He says that as time goes on, your body has trouble at first, and then it's able to try and resist the stress. But if the stress continues, eventually you will kind of give up. You just won't be able to keep dealing with it anymore, okay? So like when the test's coming up, right? Like at first you might kind of be like, oh no, there's a test coming up. And then you'll work hard, you'll study, you'll get ready. And then it's kind of time for the test, you'll give up, right? Or with a breakup, right? Or with a conflict with a significant other. Like at first you're just kind of like, oh no, it hits you. And then you try and work on it, but there comes this point where you're like, you know what? It's not worth working on anymore. So the first thing that happens when you have a stress is called alarm. And your body will have adrenaline flowing, your sympathetic nervous system gets activated as you try and deal with this threat, deal with this thing, okay? And then your body fights it. The second stage is called resistance, right? This is when your body temperature goes up, your heart rate goes up, your breathing goes up as you try to deal with this thing, whether it's a tough conversation with somebody or there's a bear coming at you, right? Your body does that fight or flight response. If you are running or if you are trying and working and pushing yourself and that threat is still there, eventually your body's just not gonna be able to handle it anymore. And we call this third stage exhaustion. Have you heard about folks? It was a phenomenon in Japan where folks were dying from stress. They were working so hard that like their hearts would just give out from the stress. That would be an example of the exhaustion stage. Okay, so the general adaptation syndrome, GAS, it is ARE. It's alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Okay, hold on. So ARE, alarm, resistance, exhaustion. Those are the three stages of the general adaptation syndrome, which sometimes gets abbreviated to GAS. So I don't know, when you're stressed, maybe your stomach starts feeling a little weird. Maybe you produce gas when you are stressed. That might be a way you remember the GAS. And ARE just spells the word R. So what are you going to do about that thing? Well, first you have alarm, then you try and fight it, and eventually you might go through exhaustion. And that's what this chart represents here. The alarm stage, as you're getting ready to fight it. Resistance, you fight it. Exhaustion, your body just kind of gives up eventually. That's Selye Stressier. So that's one reaction to stress. A guy named Ledoux, write that name down, Joseph Ledoux, he said that when there's a stress, your body just automatically responds. And he emphasized what's called the HPA axis. So within that alarm and resistance stage, the parts of your body that are active, it's the hypothalamus, right? Get hype for the hypothalamus. It controls the pituitary gland, which releases this chemical, adrenocorticotropic hormone. You don't need to write that down, just ACTH. I don't know. And then the A in HPA axis actually stands for the adrenal gland, which of course produce adrenaline, right? Adrenaline comes from the adrenal glands. And then put a circle and star. I think we've talked about this one before, but the stress hormone cortisol, when it's released in your body, it's what makes you feel amped up and agitated. We talked about it briefly in the last class. It's the thing that lets your body know something is wrong, we need to deal with it. And too much cortisol can impact an individual. If a pregnant mom has too much cortisol, that stress hormone will impact the development of the baby. Okay. Third name for stress reactions. So Selye, Stressier, Ledoux. The third name is a guy named Lazarus. who he said that stress isn't just about your body, but stress also comes from how you think about whatever's causing you stress, whatever's happening around you. Okay. So Lazarus, appraisal. I don't know if you know the story of Lazarus. He gets raised up from the dead. Appraisal. I don't know. But he said that there's two different ways that people assess stresses in their environment. We have type A folks who are higher stress. They normally are more pessimistic. They can be more competitive, more aggressive. These are our achievement motivated people, is what McClelland and Michelle might say. More likely to have high blood pressure, right? Get stressed out more easily. And then we have type B people who are more relaxed and calm, and typically these are more like your chill, artistic, reflective, imaginative folks, okay? Some of y'all are type A, you care a lot, you're a perfectionist. Some of y'all are type B, you go with the flow. A little cartoon comic to demonstrate the difference between type A and type B here. So you got, what about type A person over here makes this person seem type A, right? So they're red, representing high blood flow, potential heart disease problems. Their eyes are all messed up. They're looking at their watch. They're carrying their briefcase because they always care about work. He's literally not even touching the ground, right? And the chill type B guy says, whoa, 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 slow down, friend. And the type B guy says, don't you know that sometimes you have to stop and smell the flowers? What a type B thing to say, right? And the type B person says this, well, type A person is going to take this seriously, and they have to be the best at smelling the flowers, right? Type A folks, very competitive, can be aggressive, okay? And that impacts how they respond to stress. Now, when we talk about stress, there are different types of stresses, okay? So we have chronic, long-term stresses. And then, of course, we also have like the smaller daily stresses. So an acute angle is a smaller angle. Acute stresses are the smaller stresses, just like things that happen constantly, deadlines, homework, relationship issues with friends, having to pay bills. Those are things that we all deal with, but those can add up, okay? And like, if there's a stress and it just keeps on and it's still there, you can actually develop what's called learned helplessness. You remember us talking about that? Martin Seligman, you remember what the study was about learned helplessness? Here's a little reminder, okay? It was about these dogs that when they could not escape the shock, they eventually just kind of gave up. They became helpless. They didn't even try anymore, okay? That's the idea that sometimes stresses can overwhelm us, all right? Decision making, even just simple choices, what to have for breakfast, what to wear, those are actually still stressors, okay? And the big decisions can definitely cause stress. So when you're trying to make a decision, the stress comes from the fact that you have pros and cons, or in the world of psychology, they call them approaches, things that would make you want to do this thing, and avoids, things that would not make you want to do this thing, okay? So like, for example, you don't need to write this down, it's pretty common sense, but like, imagine I tell you that you can have M&Ms or Reese's peanut butter cups. Those are two really good choices. These are both positive choices, but you can only pick one. That's an approach conflict or decision. Let's say that I'm going to tell you I'm either going to punch you in the stomach or kick you in the shins. I would never. But if I were to tell you that, that would be an avoid conflict. You got two bad options. You got to pick one. Mostly in life, and if you want to write this down, we have what's called an approach avoid. You have to decide, should you go to the soccer match? The soccer game, should you go? Well, there are good things about it. You get to see your friends play. You might have people to hang out with. It can be a fun activity, show school spirit. There are good aspects of this opportunity, but like maybe it's cold. Like maybe your friend's not going to play this week, right? Maybe the other team's supposed to be really good. So an approach avoid conflict is when you have one option with good and bad things. That happens a lot. You got to decide what to do. And then the most common option, this is like choosing which college to go to, right? You have multiple options and there are good and bad things about each, right? Do you go to Emory? It's going to be super expensive. It's private. It's going to be tough, right? Do you go to GGC? Well, it'll be cheap, and it might be, the class might be easier, but I don't know, maybe you want to go to somewhere more prestigious. I don't know. There are pros and cons of any choice, right? The money comes into play. What kind of job can you get? How are the class sizes? What are the professors like? Who else is going? Most decisions in life are multiple approach avoids, meaning they have multiple good and bad things, and you got to try and decide what to do, right? So in class, we'll talk about a little check for understanding. Imagine you're trying to purchase a car, or you're trying to get a car, right? What would be an example of approach decision, avoid decision, an approach avoidance conflict, and this is probably the most likely case, right? When you have multiple options that have both good and bad aspects to them. So we'll do that in class together. Make sure you understand the difference. Our third Roman numeral, when we are stressed out, how do we deal with it? Okay, so they say that actually men and women, and this is generalizing, but have different ways of responding to stress. They say that males are more likely to be aggressive when they are stressed. They can be mean. Men are more likely to be physically aggressive. Girls still show this sometimes, right? And are more likely to be verbally or socially aggressive in the way they treat each other. Now, if males show more aggression, they say that a female responds, and again, this is generalizing, right? Evolutionary psych stuff. This is generalizing, but that females are more likely when stressed to turn to their family and friends, to want to take care of their close circle of people and to focus on their close relationships. We call it the tend and befriend model, how folks deal with stress. All people have coping mechanisms, things that we do to try and deal with our stresses, okay? And we're actually gonna go through 10 coping mechanisms, and these actually come from a Freudian idea that we hate it when we have anxiety and struggles. So we have 10 things that we might do to deal with our anxiety. Some are okay, some are worse than others. So we're gonna go through, this is the kind of how we're gonna wrap up, the 10 coping defense mechanisms, things that we do when stressed to try and make ourselves feel better, okay? So sometimes, number one, and I don't think you need to write down the definition. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, right? Number one is denial, right? And this also goes with Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. The first step is denial, right? Calvin here says, it's not denial, I'm just very selective about the reality I accept. Sometimes when there's a stress, let's say failing a class, we refuse to accept that, okay? Something else that we do, we might bury down our stress, right? Repression is like, we pretend everything's okay. Deep down, right, we might be stressed, worried, afraid, but we pretend like everything's okay. We bury it deep within our unconscious, right? Like, oh no, the class is fine. I'm not worried about it. I haven't even thought about the test, right? Number three, sometimes when stressed, we regress. To progress is to go forward. To regress is to go backwards. It's when you act like a little kid. Maybe you throw a temper tantrum, you have a fit, you whine and scream and cry, right? Regression is one way that some people handle stress. Rationalization is when they try to explain away the issue, right? So like Calvin here says, I should be doing my homework now, but the way I look at it, playing in the snow is a lot more important. Out here, I'm learning real skills that I can apply throughout the rest of my life. So he's trying to like come up with a reason for his actions. And Hobbes says, such as, and he says, procrastinating and rationalizing, right? That's what he's doing. He's trying to explain the stress away. Like you're failing in class, you're like, oh, well, the reason why is like the teacher hasn't put the grade in yet. And like, it's their fault that, you know, that the E-class Dropbox was too hard to find. So like, oh, like it's not my issue. Rationalizing, trying to explain something away. Number five, not a good one. This is when you're frustrated or stressed and you literally place it on somebody else. You take it out on someone else. I'll show you all this comment in class because it's hard to see here, but basically the dad yells at the wife yells at the son yells at the baby sister smacks the doll. All of these are instances of displacement. You're mad about one thing, maybe you're failing that class, and then you go take it out on a sibling or you go yell at a friend. You're not really mad at the friend, but you shift your anger towards them. You place it on them as if it was their fault. Number six is a confusing one. Projection is when you take the stress and frustration you're feeling and you say that someone else feels that way, right? So maybe you hate your teacher, you're failing the class, you're all frustrated about it, and you blame the teacher. You're not like punching the teacher or yelling at the teacher. That'd be displacement. You're blaming them. You're saying that they're the ones who have the issue, right? My teacher hates me. That's not why you failed your test, but you project your emotions. You say other people are the ones who have the issues. Number seven, sometimes people act the opposite of how they really feel, right? Gets told she's fired, starts laughing. Some people, when they're really mad, they'll actually laugh. Or when they're really stressed, they'll smile a lot. They act the opposite of how they really feel. Freud said that's a way that we try and cover up our anxiety. Number eight, compensation. If we're having a tough time with school, maybe we really focus on athletics. Okay. If we're having a tough time in our relationships, well, maybe we do a really good job of working out and exercise. It's when we focus on other areas, right? So in Shrek, they talked about compensation, right? What was Lord Farquaad's issue? Well, he was short. And Shrek says, well, rather than acknowledge his shortness, he built this really large, tall castle, right? Compensation. Number 9, catharsis. When you try and release your frustration through some sort of expression of anger and frustration. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's yelling into a pillow, right? Catharsis. People think it might make you feel better. It actually doesn't. It actually normally makes people feel worse and more tense and more stressed. And number 10, sublimation is the best thing to do with your stress. It's the one positive thing. It's when you're upset about something, angry for not being selected by the company, works hard to start their own company. Okay. It's when you take your frustration, you turn it into something good for yourself, good for society. And there's this research that shows that when we think about our lives and the fact that someday we're going to get old, we're going to die. When we think about that it makes us terrified. It gives us terror. So what we try and do is we try and make a positive difference in the world. We try and find meaning and purpose. So sublimation, it's when we channel our frustration and our worries and our concerns into something that will be good for others so that we can have meaning and purpose. Okay? Your quiz will cover these defense mechanisms. So make sure you understand them. Google them, look them up if you need to. Okay? Quick check for understanding that you can do as practice. Which defense mechanism, coping mechanism is being shown in these 5 situations. There might be 1 or 2 answers for some of these, especially with number 4. Okay, so good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. I will see you guys later. Peace out.